Good morning. For me, it's good afternoon, but I know there'll be others who are good evening. So I was introduced before. I'm Alison Turnbull. I'm Director of External Relations and Partnerships at Historic Environment Scotland, but the main reason I'm here is I'm a board member of Scotland's Towns Partnership. So I'm based in Edinburgh, Scotland. So I know I'm putting that in because it's quite an international audience today. So as you know, the theme is town level sustainability, but our specific topic is around community participation, good governance and innovation. So I'm delighted to be joined by an excellent and very wide-ranging panel. And today, really want to explore the concept that the localization of sustainable development goals can be achieved to make towns in small cities sustainable, prosperous and livable. However, to get there, the methods we use have to be inclusive and involve community participation and good governance. And I know from the range of speakers we've got today, we're going to get some really good, not only theoretical, but practical ideas. So there are meant to be 7 speakers in this session, but I've just heard that 3 haven't joined. So for those of you who are part of the audience, please bear with us because it might be I slot these people in if they do attend. For each of my speakers, and for those of you who are listening, the speakers will provide a 5-minute sort of introduction to their topic. I will give you a 1-minute warning, so just be prepared for that, speakers. But then there will be plenty of time at the end to explore the issues raised by the speakers and for all of us, myself included, to pose questions, because I think with 5 minutes we're going to get a really exciting intro into what they're going to talk about. So I'm going to rearrange the agenda and start with Sophia Elliott. So I can see Sophia here on my screen. So Sophia is an intern at Alder Hill Planning, and you're based in British Columbia in Canada. So you're at the School of Community and Regional Planning in the Master of Community and Regional Planning program with a concentration on Indigenous community planning. And as an Indigenous woman, Sophia's work's guided by her cultural community, family values and teaching, and her education background combined with her work and lived experiences allow her to work through a cross-cultural lens. So Sophia, over to you now.
Ainetas, everybody. Good morning. Anta Sialthawat, Tinitanat Kawatan. So my traditional name is Sialthawat, which I share with my oldest brother as well as my paternal grandfather. And right now, I'm currently situated in my home territory of Kawatan, where I was born and raised. What is Indigenous community planning? It's something we've been talking about extensively. The fact that this field even exists now and the amount of work that's gone into it just in the last decade, like formally in these like colonial institutions and settings, like blew my mind. When it comes to like community participation and good governance, first and foremost, what we're being taught and what we're practicing and prioritizing is that good relationship building. Again, with planning itself historically being an apparatus of colonization, we are actively working to either indigenize, or if you're not of an Indigenous descent, decolonizing your practice and approach. We can sit here and talk about all the theories and methodologies and historical approaches to planning, but ultimately, if we aren't each playing an active role in changing these systems that are historically oppressive and discriminatory and racist, then what are we doing? As it pertains to Indigenous planning, again, even just calling it Indigenous planning itself, it's not even just that, but holistic approaches to the work that we do, recognizing how someone having a roof over their head or like affordable housing, like it'll impact their income, their social structures, their family structures, and other components of their life. So recognizing how everything is interconnected and interrelated. And Indigenous planning, like comprehensive community planning, like that's what that is. And when it comes to strategic planning or official community plans, like building off of work that already exists, recognizing what works and what doesn't, what we need to be doing different to drive social and political change to improve the lives of the people that we're planning for, and ensuring that the work that we do is reflective of their values and priorities and needs, and not what's most cost effective or what looks the prettiest, or making decisions for one population at the expense of another, and not further exploiting or oppressing or discriminating against the people that would benefit from these changes the most, whether it's planning for housing or a new park or all of these things. Especially in communities like in British Columbia, where there's a high density of First Nations populations, whether you realize it or not, you might be planning it, if not directly in a community that it has a population of Indigenous people or adjacent to. And 9 times out of 10, you're likely planning on territory that is unceded, ancestral, and traditional, that very well may be used in this day still. But that's a whole nother thing in itself. So I guess as it pertains to like community participation, good governance, and innovation, just really, whether your impact, you think it may be big or small, just recognizing your role in this process and how we can drive change together in order to plan for a better future for the future generations. Not much more I can add in 5 minutes, but I really want to thank everybody that's present here today, that's participating in these conversations, and shout out to Jessie Hemphill, my mentor and supervisor at Alder Health Planning, and to the amazing work that they do. So yeah, that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thanks, Sophia, and also thanks, because I know I jumped on you to start this off as well, but I mean, certainly for me, I'm really interested in what you were saying. Those of you might have picked up my accent. I actually grew up in New Zealand, so even though I haven't lived there for a while, I'm from a quite a diverse multicultural family, so I've been really interested in, and I guess the sort of cross-cultural comparison, and one thing that really resonated with me in what you were speaking about is talking about the theories and actually changing systems. And I'm actually attending an event on Friday, which is addressing exactly that. So there's a lot of work, certainly in the UK and in Scotland, about empire and impact of empire, and then how that plays through into contemporary systems. So the event I'm at is about dismantling, accepting that inequality, well, not accepting, saying that's there, and how can we change systems. So thank you, Sophia. You've given us a lot in your 5 minutes to follow up on. So that's brilliant. So I'm going to move on to Ali Harvey now. So I'm hoping you're joining us from Ireland, so we're jumping countries here. So Ali is a co-founding, a sort of founding coordinator of Ireland's Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme, and founder of Irish Walls Towns Network. So she's based in Kilkenny in Ireland, and she works as a planning programmes manager at Heritage Council in Ireland. So she's an author of a community-led village design statement toolkit, but she's also worked really internationally with groups from the UK, Australia, and Spain. So I will hand to you now, Ali.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Yay. Okay, so greetings from Ireland. All right, yeah. So just to say, I suppose community participation is really everything that I do. It's really why I am a planner. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. As I keep saying to sort of civic groups. So 5 minutes, I will try my best. I'll listen to do that. Okay, so really just to say, you know, in Ireland, it's all about people and place, and that's for the good of our citizens and also for our diaspora. I just want to talk today about care, collaboration, and democratization of data. So, you know, really everything that I do is sort of trying to make sure that communities are given a voice and that they are empowered. So yeah, just to really start off by sort of a bit about my background. You know, I grew up in the Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and at that time we had sort of 4 meters, 12 feet, you know, steel fencing around our city centres. So our city centres closed at 6 o'clock. So that kind of gave me an awareness from a very young age that, you know, if the people who actually cared about towns and city centres, if they weren't involved, you know, that they could actually die or that they could have a very slow death. So yeah, I think that whole sort of upbringing, you know, lives with you and impacts on you and shapes you. So then just to fast forward to 2016, and I set up Ireland's Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme. And that was basically because business and civic leaders kept coming to me in the Heritage Council and asking me, could I do something? So just to say, I suppose that I cared and so did they. But in that first year, I didn't have any funding. So I just went around the country, around the universities, the ITs, and asked them, would they help me and work with me? And basically everybody said, if it's for the good of the country, if it's for the good of Ireland and for our citizens, that people would do it for free. So that really emboldened me. And just it's so lovely to actually be able to say that, you know, that first year. Obviously I have funding now, but in that first year I didn't. So yeah, I mean, I do really care about towns. I had set up the Irish World Towns Network as well in 2005. So yeah, we've got 15 towns in the programme, 70 partners involved, and we have a waiting list of 50 plus partners, 50 plus towns wanting to come into the programme. So just to say about those people that worked with me, you know, who are still in the programme, like they're the people who didn't sit back. They, you know, we didn't really want to listen to blockers and we wanted to get around the blockages. So collaboration, as I say, everything to do with this Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme, that's really at its heart. And it involves regional assemblies, government departments, local authorities, universities, critical to have the young people involved. That is our USP. There's no egos. I really am not a person for egos. I believe in collaborative leadership. And yeah, just say we've won a few national awards, Bank of Ireland, Most Enterprising Towns Award, we've won that twice, so it's great. So yeah, just to say, you know, we're just going to go round in circles, really, I suppose, if we don't get rid of these blockers and the blockages that are holding us back. And collaboration is everything to me. So just in terms of the democratization of data, you know, really what I'm trying to do is create primary data. We don't charge for it. We work with the communities. You know, as part of the data that I started to create with those towns in the early days, then I started advocating for town centre first policy. Very much, Alison, I suppose, looking at what Scotland was doing as well. You know, so I mean, you guys have been a great support to us. Thanks to Philip Prentice, who has been a great support to me from Scotland. So yeah, the call we started in 2019 calling for town centre first policy for Ireland. And also then I did a workshop with the Scottish in Dundalk, actually, which was a Brexit town, we would call it. You know, we were trying to focus on the towns that were going to be impacted most by Brexit along the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So Phil came over for that and it was great. So then that was our second call for town centre first, and then it was picked up and put into the programme for government, into Ireland's programme for government. So TCF was published earlier this year, but unfortunately it doesn't have any targets in it, which is obviously one of the things that we would have liked to see right from the start. So yeah, just to say, a few weeks ago we launched Tipperary, long way to Tipperary, and that's their first baseline report, their Collaborative Town Centre Health Check baseline. So that's phase one, that's what we do. So those people, the businesses, they walk the streets with us. You know, one of the key steps of the 15-step methodology that I designed at the start is to do a land use survey. Just to say, our vacancy rates are very high. They're out of kilter really with what you would find in other European countries. The target would be 5% for ground floor retail vacancy, and we're finding ours at 24. I've just surveyed a town there, it's at 45. So really, you know, we're not meant to be above 11%. So that really was, again, in that first year, the reason why I kept going. The first town that we found was 24%. So yeah, the European target is 5. The Dutch are at 6.8. The Danish are at 5. They came down from 12%. They introduced really strict policy. So yeah, just to finish off, I have phase 2 of the Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme all ready to go. I'm just waiting for resources from the Irish government under the programme for government commitment. And really it's, you know, again, working with those civic and business leaders is just so, so important. Those people have a handle on where their towns are at. And as I say, if they don't have the data, it's very hard to plan, you know, financially to do your investment plans, you know, and to make sure that taxpayers' money is spent efficiently, and also for private sector investors to give them the baselines that they need. So yeah, just to finish off by saying, you know, I just want to talk, you know, it's so, so important to talk about, you know, caring for places. We need people who care. And really it's trying to find those people right at the start, you know, at the get-go. We also need to collaborate on towns and cities, and this is just a wonderful event. So it's, I mean, it's an absolute thrill and delight to be here. Looking forward to the discussion. And we also need to talk about the democratization of data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali. As Ali mentioned, a lot of the context, policy context you're talking about is actually very familiar to me in terms of the policy context I work in as well, sort of in terms of people in place. But I think what sort of came through for me, and which I liked how you started with your own personal story as well, but what's come through for me is around the democratization of data, but also one thing, just flagging to all speakers I'd be interested in picking up in the discussion is in around collaboration and who we should be collaborating with, because I think you not only talked about say public sector partners, but also private sector. Maybe there are atypical partners, and I'm conscious, given the wide grouping we've got on this call, that we'll all have a lot to learn from each other. So thank you very much for that. So I'm going to move on to my next speaker, who's Robert Voigt, who is Director of Development Services in the Municipality of Mayford in Ontario, Canada. So Robert is a registered professional planner practicing for 25 years in development consulting and government sectors in Canada and the USA, with successes recognized internationally in urban design, healthy community planning and design, and stakeholder engagement. So I think, Robert, you're going to build on a lot of what we've talked about today. So in 2020, he was on the advisory team that founded FEEL, Planning for Health, Equity, Advocacy and Leadership. And in 2019, he became the first international member of the Urban Land Institute Health Leaders Network. So Robert, looking forward to hearing from you now. I can see Robert is on the call. Shall I? Oh, have you?
There we go. I wasn't allowed to unmute myself. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
No worries.
We're working out live technical issues.
That's okay. All right. Well, I'm going to do my best here. Good morning, everyone. For my few minutes, I'm going to discuss this idea of community participation in good governance. I suggest, first of all, that we need to take action to shift our perspectives in subtle but powerful ways. These are important because they can underlie all of the work that we do moving forward. I'm going to make these suggestions because if we don't do these, the changes, we risk that we find ourselves continuing on paths that are unfortunately not building the long-lasting successes we need. And again, I'll recognize that although that we have people from across the globe participating over these 2 days, my perspective is, as you'd mentioned, a professional planner working here primarily in North America. But I think these simple insights and suggestions can be adapted to other local contexts. So I'd like to highlight 3 specific terms or perspectives because they're key to our understanding. Firstly, we need to reconsider the idea of, quote, problem solving in our communities. When we solve for problems, we limit the possibilities that rest within our communities and the skills and gifts that are inherent to our citizens. By problem solving, we define persons and groups and entire communities by the dimensions of things that they lack. This is an ever narrowing perspective, and that leads to service-based actions and institutional viewpoints of what a community, quote, needs to succeed, as opposed to seeing what we can do and can work on together when what communities are capable of. We need to focus on what's strong, not what's wrong, and make what's strong stronger still, and then use that to lift up what's wrong. The second point is about the words we use to describe the persons that make up our communities. I deliberately used the word citizen just moments ago because it expresses the depth and breadth of the relationships and responsibilities we have to each other when we are working in community. We far too often hear phrases here, particularly in the municipal world, referring to persons as ratepayers or customers, which limit our understanding of these persons to only having a value based on their ownership of property or by the transactions they undertake with local government. This obviously also marginalizes others who do not fit in with these categories. And the final note is that we should reconsider our view on identifying, quote, pilot projects. And I know this is actually something that came out in the first one of these sessions here in Collingwood. I suggest that we want to undertake things that are a little different because by their very nature, pilot projects are temporarily limited. They are supposed to be a process of prototyping. What we need is to find success and adapt practices from elsewhere for our context. We should be implementing catalytic projects that foster a movement of change and action, not building a local research model that is entered into with limited commitment and timidly shuffling into the future. We need things that will cause change to the system. So I'll make a few final points. I'll argue that in North America for the past few decades, we've created too many processes that cater to the participation of the well-positioned, the privileged, the connected, and the politically astute. And as professionals, we should be asking ourselves, who are the persons that have been marginalized and who are those that are seldom listened to? We need to relearn how to work in collaboration with citizens in community space. We work in institutional space, and those are very different environments. And we need to learn how to offer our skills from that institutional perspective with honesty and reflection on our capabilities and biases as well. We don't need to kind of colonize community space with institutional mandates and misappropriate community skills and gifts to fulfill our framework to meet that, quote, problem solving. We need to work as professional alongsiders with open offerings and always ready to collaborate on actions when asked. We don't need to do things to or for communities, but to better recognize the capability for citizens and communities to ask us to help with their actions and witness those that they do by themselves. We need to replace to and for with the concepts of with and by community. And with that, I'll end my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And indeed, thank you all speakers, because you're making my job of keeping you to time very easy because you're very succinct. But Robert, again, your contribution, I think, is built really well on what we've heard so far. I'm going to steal your phrase, focus on what's strong, not wrong. I think that's absolutely brilliant.
I have to give credit. You should be not my phrase, very happily borrowed from Cormac Russell. He is out of Ireland and with the organization Nurture Development, and is a genius in this space.
I've heard him speak, yeah, and I think another thing that really came through from what you were talking about there is actually the power of language. I was really taken with your point about referring to citizens and not actually by the use of language excluding communities, but you've also got me thinking about how we often, those who work alongside me in sort of public sector, we do rely on pilots, but actually what does that mean in terms of system change? And I think that point connects very well to Sophia's contribution as well. So thank you. I am just going to move along now to introduce Marilyn Struthers. So Marilyn is the principal of M. Struthers and Co. So she's joining us from Ontario in Canada. So Marilyn has worked with people seeking to shape the landscape of their communities in social change and organizing for 50 years. And she uses complexity and social innovation methods with community development and a systems change view. So she has facilitated, taught, coached, organised research, and written about organising practice in Canada's social sector. So Marilyn, I will move on to you now, but I know there might be a slight pause in terms of coming off mute.
Okay, I think I'm off mute.
That's right, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, good. Good. I think I'm going to take that 50 years out of the bio because it tells you two things about me. One is that I've never done anything else but work in community level organizing, nationally, provincially, and in my own community around Georgian Bay, which is the same community as Rob Voigt's in. It also tells you I'm an old person. And in this section, I'm going to talk a little bit more formally. We're going to try out on you a slide deck that we are using as part of a toolkit, and I'll tell you who we are in a sec. And because it boils down a year and a half's worth of big thinking on the role of our municipalities in our rural communities. It's created with the help of Yvonne Hamlin, who is the new mayor of Collingwood, Shirley Keaveney, who is the deputy mayor of Meaford, and Carol Merton, who's with us on this screen, who's re-elected to Owen Sound. So we're in a shift time, talking about complexity. It's not business as usual. COVID, climate change, the housing crisis. And in a shift time, communities experience cascades of unpredictable change. All of these are problems not of our making at the local level, but local becomes more important because the impact is right here. And local municipalities' roles are having to change to find solutions to mitigate harm. And also because citizens are expecting more and different. It's not about roads and bridges in any sense now. Next slide, please. With the Institute of Southern Georgian Bay Social Finance and Housing Group, we set this up to explore social finance and are realizing quickly that we have both an overlook over a number of municipalities. It's kind of a bit of an unusual view for a citizens group, but also that we can see how the role of our municipalities is going to have to change in order for us to be able to take up social finance kinds of structures in the way that they're being taken up by larger municipalities. The aha around the difference between how some of our communities are responding and others are struggling is that the difference really is about the culture of municipal operation. It's about how people think. It's less about regulation and more about how councillors and their staff actually use local government processes to find solution finding approaches. And I appreciate a lot of what Rob said in terms of asset-based approaches and also Alison in terms of collaboration. Next slide, please. So what I'm going to suggest here as fast as I can is 3 good ways of thinking that would benefit municipalities to incorporate, and then a quick menu of practices that we've developed between us, working with municipalities and also working with municipal leaders. The first is this first of the 3 good ways of thinking is seeing our community as an ecosystem, really understanding that it is made up of local systems, systems of care, systems of business, families, systems of worship, and so on. And that these in turn are embedded in the greater systems where the shifts are actually happening, whether politics, monetary policy, healthcare, infection, those kinds of things. So this really invites municipalities to ask, how do they support sustainable and resilient local systems? Next slide. And then we can borrow this frame from the social innovation field, because these smaller systems can be grouped into 3 community level categories by impact. So the impact on people, on planet, on profit. And then municipalities can stay mindful of what these systems need to thrive. The super important thing about this model is that we often treat these as siloed, as if they were separate and operate alone, but at the community level, they're deeply, deeply interrelated. If homeless people move into the downtown core, every single business is impacted. Next, please. the best solutions in that framework are almost always in the middle. They're at the intersections, and that requires cross-sectoral collaboration. And that's really what we've been experimenting with. Social enterprise developers, municipal guarantees on loan funds, and actually municipal governments are right in the middle of that 3-section wheel. And what could hold it together is SDG 11. In really understanding what the context-sensitive measures would be for a community in those intersections. Now, bear in mind, our community has some 60 different municipalities, so very small and without scale. One of our municipalities this year boasts 370 new units. Adequate safe housing, okay, but are they actually affordable to the low-wage workers who fuel our current economic drivers, which are healthcare? So think PSWs, tourism, and retail. And if not, what happens next? No housing, no employees, no business. So in terms of planning, what are the local measures, the data measures that link housing not only to homelessness problem solving, if you like, but actually links housing affordability to incomes in the key sectors. So in this way, we can bring together social justice and an economic view at the community level. There's an opportunity here for rural municipalities to focus on housing plans, not just for hope for growth, but really on current workforce sustainability and the immediate right now needs of a community. And I'll just note that very few of our municipalities actually foresaw the rental crisis for low-wage workers that we are deep in now. Next slide. So these have transition zones, and if you don't mind. What are those practices that we've identified? First transition. The ability to shift gears. There's no stability in a shift time, none. So there's no point planning for long-term stability. Things will need to change. Neutral learning spaces, finding non-political spaces like these, like our group, which is a non-political group, has been referred to as Switzerland, where the task is just learning together cross-sectorally. Next, please. Municipalities must set the agenda, but the strongest ones we see are devolving the power of solution finding to community tables, more public engagement. In our communities, particularly, we're rich and retired professionals with skills and the inclination to give back. So task forces are giving some communities the jump on housing, and others are still working out the definitions. Next, please. Definitions. We're actually seeing municipalities make up their own definitions of affordability. And this truly, truly creates a model. We have the StatsCan definition of 30% of income that is connected to employment, to workplace, and that is connected to economics. So shared definition across communities is a hook for collaboration. Next, please. And many municipalities have local or are thinking about local task forces. But once we have them in each community, there's an opportunity to link local to regional. While municipalities need regional data to see the landscape, it's local data that actually guides individual development decisions at council. And next, looking for avenues to leverage community wealth, and that's part of our toolkit and very much learning in our communities. It's being done in cities. There's no reason why rurals can't do it. We just have to do it different. And finally, doesn't maybe show up? Yeah, we have to mitigate. Oh, we have so many small municipalities, and we can't solve these problems one by each. We have to learn together and scale the best ideas. That's collaboration in one form or another. And this is the culture shift that our region's sustainability may actually depend on. Thanks. I'm keen to hear how this connects.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. I think your 7 points of your culture shift menu, there's a lot of content in that, which I think many people will want to draw in, but one thing that I thought was quite interesting is focusing on the municipalities, but also your use of local task force, which also connects to the point Ali was making as well, in and around citizen assemblies. And that will be something that will be also interested for the people who are part of this wider meeting to see what their experience is. Now, I'm meant to be moving to Q&A, but I was conscious we had 3 speakers who were not here at the beginning. So I'm going to ask if these speakers are with us, given the mute, unmute situation. If any of these 3 speakers are with us, if they could put a comment in the chat, we will then unmute you to contribute. So I'm not sure if Zaneba Ben Hamu is here, or Mike Danag, or Ishmael Afra. We'll just wait a couple of minutes if or Ozan, you might be aware of that they have joined us.
They have not, but if you like, we can move on to the Q&A session.
Great, let's do that. So we've got a lot of thoughts, inspiration. I've jotted down some questions I want to go through, but obviously you've all been listening. In terms of the Q&A, we are wanting to get 2 to 3 points for the resolution drafting, but there's been a lot of common points. I think that's come out for me around resources, leadership, community participation, ecosystems, and also the conditions for collaboration. I think a lot of our speakers have pulled up on that. I wanted to raise some points from the 2021 resolution that I think we can build on to think what we want for 2022. So again, I think our speakers have built on this in and around civic leadership and the importance of civic leadership for consensus and for driving policy initiatives. Data collection systems, I think Ali, you particularly looked at this, but I think it's really important for capacity building in towns. Bottom-up approach, Sophia, I think you were certainly connecting to that, and inclusivity. I think all of our speakers have touched upon that. So I'm noticing positive commentary in the chat around some of the speakers we've heard. I'll get Ozan to keep me right. In terms of asking questions, is it best to ask people to put them in the chat or raise their hand and we can unmute them? What would be the best way to do this?
I believe they should raise their hands.
Marvelous. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. And so there's a lot we can unpack from our speakers. So
We have Ananta's hand up.
great. So who's that? Oh,
Please go ahead, Christian.
Thank you. Thanks again. Thanks for this very, very inspiring as well as thought-provoking interventions, the points that came out of this session. I have only 2 or 3 points I just want to know. As Robert Folk mentioned that this piloting best practices. We're all now used to this kind of jargons of both planners, architects, everybody in the computer business, because they are used to this terminology. To what extent they indeed inhibit public participation and communal participation, so that it leaves to specialists. So public participation very often becomes participation of the more vocal, more special, so-called more qualified section of the population, rather than people who need to be heard or need to participate. Yeah. So are there ways in which we could build in these functions of public participation that indeed is public participation, and not just sort of lip service saying that we sent the document for discussion, we didn't get any comments, it was approved kind of thing. I was just wondering, are there, of course we don't have any clear answer, may not have clear answers, just want to know what Robert's ideas are as to sort of breaking down the jargons, breaking down this idea of just one pilot practice would eventually lead to many of the practices, like the best practice also something we're talking about. Because why I'm saying this is because we are working on this World Urban Pavilion, which is supposed to be a knowledge exchange hub established by Urban Economy Forum, CMHC, and Daniels Corporation with UN Habitat. So if the World Urban Pavilion has to be a knowledge exchange hub, how can this have facilitate this exact participation of cities, municipalities, and communities in making in good governance a possibility? Yeah, that is something that would be interesting to know. Then also, just to Marilyn's point that we have a lot of municipalities and cities, they say that is why this resolution, 2020 resolution, talks about establishing a global town leaders network. So how can this town leaders network indeed be, are there your thoughts on how this network should eventually function? Are there small municipalities and cities could participate in contributing to a greater, global kind of coalition of idea exchange and implementing things? Yeah. Then my final thing is about the Irish question. You see, it's just not so long ago, I was at the Bombay Street in Belfast, and so it was quite interesting to see that that's actually a walled city now, in the sense that after 8 p.m. nobody can go out and in and out of certain areas, kind of a thing. So I'm wondering why has some places where participation and discussion have worked, and what are the conditions you need for creating harmony and understanding where there are already divisions? It will be difficult to sort of set up some dialogue and participation. Like we are seeing, number of cities in the world today are in conflict, different groups fighting with each other, kind of a thing. How can cities indeed contribute to this kind of social cohesion and participation in city development? Thanks.
Thanks, Krishnan. I think you raised points for all of our speakers now. So you did start with Robert. So I'll suggest the order that we go in is Robert, Ali, Marilyn, and Sophia. So if you just all provide your contribution and follow one another in that order. Thank you.
There we go, unmuted. All great points. Really quick, because I know we don't have a lot of time. It's not even just about jargon, it's about understanding the premise from which we are building our perspective. So when we talk about community engagement, I mean, if we're not working in community and not working alongside community, what is this? When you start thinking about what does this mean, engaging the community? I thought we are supposed to be essentially hand in hand. That's why I like to use the kind of the terminology of the alongsiders, right? So that's one part of it. What are things you can do? You just have to get on with doing the work differently and understanding that there's incremental change. We have a bit of a modernist perspective where we are going to create a model that can be adapted and boils all the conditions down to their most elemental components, and then spread far and wide, kind of mass produced. And that's not how community has ever been built, right? Communities are always incremental and have to be based on what the citizens, the participants within the community want. So I think the questions are even bigger than you suggested. It involves increasing questions of ourselves as professionals about where is our bias, what are the words we're using, what are we trying to get at, and less about just trying to create more channels for the public to, quote, engage with us. We have to learn how to work in community space better. I mean, my choices of language is going to be very different, no matter how aware I am, than the way Sophia started this whole a series of discussions. And it's not, this is more than just semantics. This is about core understanding of what we're saying and what our positions are within that. So that's all I'll add to that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, just really, I suppose, with the Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme that we set up in Ireland, really what we're focusing on is young people, to make sure that they're participating. We have a housing crisis at the minute, and a lot of that has been impacted and felt more, keenly by young people. So I suppose everything is interdependent. So we're working obviously with the students, third level students, north and south, and also where we've just started recently in the last few months going into the secondary schools to work with those kids as well. And we're just about to publish, we have a project done in another Brexit town, looking at the role of historic trees, and we have young people looking at that, and we're working with the schools. So it's very much about asking them about their place and what is special, and how can we get them to have a voice in the future of their own towns. Then I suppose my own experience with growing up in Northern Ireland, really, I suppose what I, observed or took part in was that because of the Troubles, I think Northern Ireland people were more sort of politicized and more willing to engage. And also the structures, I suppose, to sort of try and dampen down any problems was to try and facilitate that. So I would say definitely that, I would have seen a lot more partnership approaches in the north. And in the south, that's, I suppose, one of the things that I'm trying to sort of focus on is creating those collaborative approaches and partnerships and things. And I suppose really what we also need to look at is the different types of democracy, whether it's representative democracy, which is what Ireland embraced after we got independence. So yeah, I mean, we're a very young country. A representative democracy, we vote our politicians in, they represent us. And then obviously there's different types of democracy. So, participatory democracy, where you have an engaged, engaged citizens, and all the sort of, benefits of that. And then obviously, I mean, my postgrad dissertation many years ago would have looked at the different types of democracies, and also direct democracy, which would be something that would be practiced in Switzerland. But obviously that takes a lot of money. And as we all know, to do collaboration properly takes resources, takes time, takes patience and determination. So yeah, I would say, from my own upbringing or whatever background, it's trying to sort of bring the best of Northern Ireland and what happened as a result of the Troubles to a very young country that I have settled in, moved to 22 years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress, obviously, the Republic of Ireland. And it's going to be interesting now the next few years to see, can we embrace and pivot towards those participative models.
Marilyn, do you want to come in now?
Yeah.
Thanks, Ali.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start with the culture of engagement first. Organizations work with two sets of practice: how they think and how they have practices, right? How they think and how they do. And I think what I see in our rural municipalities, I've lived in my small community for a very long time, is that the kind of top-down instrumental approach to government worked really quite well through the 70s and 80s. It doesn't work so well when everything is changing very fast. And we can't expect municipal governments to have all the knowledge resources at their hands. It's just not reasonable, and particularly when it's in the community. Why wouldn't you look for that? So there are good practices of engagement, and we see some of our municipalities doing really creative planning approaches, and we see others who would prefer they didn't have to talk to citizens a great deal. I think I'll just put that frankly, that's how we see it. And if you look across the whole social sector, let's take government, nonprofits, philanthropy, roll them together, business as well, just for a sec, you'll see there's a trend towards greater engagement. And it all across there. So it makes sense that municipalities would be moving in this direction. And I think it behooves people in the community to really support that movement, help out. I work also in the field of climate change, and we have 11 different communities related to their municipalities here, trying to move an agenda for climate change planning. And one of the things that we've really noticed is the difference between municipalities, and it's not about regulation. It's sort of an a surprise. It actually is about whether people are willing to engage community or not. And are aware of the practices. So what part of our work just beyond that is to look at how we engage local people in investments, so that we're not completely reliant on tax dollars, but we can actually leverage some of the urban newcomers of wealth in our communities who could invest in local housing through something like a community bond. And to do that, we need the participation of municipalities, because we don't have the density of nonprofits. That's the way we'll have to do it. And then to the whole thing about the network of towns, the biggest learning for me yesterday came from Eduardo Lopez Marenco talking about the interrelationships between towns and cities, between rural communities and urban centers. And that if we were really planning in an effective way, we would be planning across a region that included those things. That the impact on our communities of urban people leaving with greater wealth, leaving the city during the pandemic and moving into and buying up real estate and turning many of those into Airbnbs. They don't want to live in them. It's been an enormous impact. And so it needs that broader look at the relationships between cities and towns. And I actually think that's true of First Nations as well in our communities, that we're looking more broadly. So I don't know, the jury's still out for me on the network of towns, whether or not it is just another siloed arrangement, or whether that could actually take that broader interrelated view.
Thanks, Marilyn. I'll bring in Sophia now. I'm trying to unmute. Oh, it looks like you're unmuted. Brilliant.
There's not a whole lot more I can add except building off of what's already been said and what Rob threw in the chat. So of course there's no one size fits all approach. And I guess again, like the theme being innovative. So getting innovative and creative with the ways that we engage community, again, the use of language, community partners versus stakeholders. One of the things, especially with comprehensive community planning, is like having a strong framework and foundation to work off of, identifying the scope of work, the budget, who should be involved, identifying a sort of working group or task force, project leads. And Rob, what he threw in the chat, I was going to say definitely like utilize community champions, people who could contribute to the work at hand. And then depending on the type of work, that could also support capacity building and training within the community. Yeah, I don't know, best practice. We had a lengthy discussion last week, like does practice inform policy or does policy inform practice? So again, looking at existing work, what works and what doesn't, and wanting engagement. Like you said, not wanting it to just be a lip service, like making sure it's meaningful and purposeful, and recognizing what components of planning our work would really benefit from community participation and input versus the more technical components of the work where you would seek that specific expertise or special interest groups or a specific group. I don't know, like, again, not to repeat too much of what's already been said, just other than being creative and again, like recognizing the importance of it and why it's needed, or I guess where it's not, so you're not burning out the community or the staff and resources and time. Yeah, that's all I really have to add. Sorry.
No, thanks, Sophia. And that's also feedback I've had with some sort of collaborative work I've been involved with, because the same people seem to always be approached. And I think that's a really important point about who we work with and the potential for burnout in terms of that. So Rosalind Morrison has asked a question in the chat for Rob, but I'll just bring you off mute, Rosalind, if you want to ask the question yourself. And I think anyone else, if you just pop your hand up and I'll come to you. So here we go, Rosalind, hopefully unmuting you now.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, this conversation with everyone is so interesting, and it is aspirational in ways that are inspiring. So thank you. I think that, nurturing conditions for more community connectors, for more community participation is so important. And I think the idea of catalytic projects is tempting rather than pilot projects that Rob mentioned. So Rob, over to you in terms of from your view of the landscape, what should we be thinking about for our first few catalytic projects?
There we go. This is good because I was typing a response. It's one of those things. If you, I think it was Marshall McLuhan said that if you believe it, then you'll see it, right? Pilot projects tend to be again, and this is a bit of a stereotypical because then it's a very obvious, right? So a little hyperbolic explanation here. If it's grant driven, it's not sustainable. So it's not real. If it has to be further validated to continue, you are still testing something. There's no need to test the kinds of things that we're talking about here. We've been building communities of various kinds for thousands of years. Even in our North American context, we've been doing it for a few hundred years, and with obviously all the successes and terrible failures that how that even started. But we need to recognize that much of what we're talking about in the context of, for example, housing, is we're building homes and some infrastructure to support it, roads and pipes in the ground. Not complicated in the sense that we have already figured it out. So why are we trying to get hyper specialization that is adjacent to that work to try to take it over? So to colonize that and make that a government program makes no sense, quite frankly. So if you need to keep testing it to see if you can do it again, then it's not a catalytic project. You haven't, you're not moving on. There's value in those, but let's not mistake one for the other is all I'm suggesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. And Marge Schneeben-Edie has got her hand up, so I will just, I think you've been unmuted, so there you go, Marge.
Thank you. I think this message is really, really important, but one of the things that I'm always struggling with is that, we're seeing reduced democratic participation across the country, at least in Canada. People are opting out. And when we're talking about systems change, particularly in municipalities, we're not seeing great participation from people who may be marginalized, from people who have lived experience, special needs. These voices are so important, and I think that point has been made. But what I haven't seen is how we change our systems to accommodate and to seed and to encourage and facilitate participation. And I think that's going to take systems change, special accommodations. Let's say a single mom with 2 kids can't show up for a committee meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What kinds of things need to change within our systems to hear these voices loud and clear and have them participate in change? Thank you.
Thanks, Marge. You're reminding me of a talk I was at a couple of years ago where they explored the life cycle of like the example you provided of, say, a single mum with 2 kids and looking at her engagement with say with municipalities and with different agencies, and how there was often a repetition because the systems were structured in a certain way, but also services were not joined up. So that's just a reflection from me on that. So Marilyn, I see you're off mute. I think you're going to come in on that, and
Okay.
Any of the other panel speakers, if you wish to contribute, if you could let me know, direct message me, let me know. But there you go, Marilyn.
All right, thanks. I'll be brief. Marg and I work together, so she probably knows everything that I might think. But it occurs to me that engagement is about invitation, and invitation is often about relationship. And so I know if you invite a single mom, as Mark says, to something that's happening over the dinner hour or at 7 o'clock at night when her kids are going to bed, it's not going to happen. You have to understand, I think we have to understand, municipal councils in particular, when they seek engagement, have to be targeted. These big public meetings where anyone can show up, they start to sound the same. It's the same people talking. It's often older men in our community. And I think we need to be more, I don't want to use the word targeted, but I can't at the moment think of another one, more focused on the populations that we are not usually hearing from. And I'll just give an example of this. Last year, the Community Foundation, Greybeards Community Foundation, did a wonderful 1.5 to 2 hour event where people were invited as speakers who were struggling with poverty. And they were known well to the poverty task force in the area, and they were invited to tell their stories in a very honoring way, and they did. And 80 people then were able to workshop those stories with those people on Zoom in breakout rooms. So that is not a municipal structure. There were a few municipal councillors there, but it was a wonderful opportunity to know what the housing crisis looked like as it was emerging and largely unrecognized in our community by people who are actually on the front line of that, who are going to be impacted first. And I know some of those people are currently on our streets in Owen Sound. So I think using broad brushstrokes, broad thought about who's not at the table, and then building the relationships to be able to draw that in and not expect that standard mechanisms are going to work.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. I'm going to bring Sophia in now because she wants to add to this, so I will just try and unmute her.
I think the only comment I have to add, I believe it was Michael Hooper, who's one of my professors. One of the concepts that we discussed was invented spaces versus invited. And then the work that like Alderhill does, and of course other entities, is be willing to adapt and be flexible, much like what's already been said, like especially when engaging like in my home community, if we have an AGM or audit meeting or anything, like taking into consideration those reasons someone might not be able to attend, so also providing transportation, a meal, like childcare, so support and incentives for their participation, transparency, like having it available online or live stream, much like this session, or a recording available, minutes, and again, being clear with the intent and purpose, so it doesn't seem like something that wouldn't be worth their time or that they won't ultimately benefit from. So yeah, just invited versus invented, especially if the way that those spaces have been held in the past aren't working, then it needs to change. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. I think the contributions, not only from Mark's question, but Marilyn, your responses have got me thinking about a way I've been changing how I work as well. So any work we develop, as opposed to it's going to people, and the term we used is seldom heard voices. So it's actually acknowledging the point that other speakers have made, that any sort of engagement do tend to be dominated by a certain substrata and might be slightly dodgy. The point I'm about to raise, I know my own community council, I know that there have been some decisions which I would say don't reflect the wider community, because the people who do engage and have the time to engage, and I guess the cultural capital to engage, are very different from the rest of the population that live in my area. So thanks, you've sparked something off. I'm going to bring Ali off mute at the moment because she's also got something to contribute to this.
Thanks. Yeah, it was just, I suppose, to, seize the opportunities when they happen, and to see the opportunities that are there. And really, I suppose it's all about positive disruption. I mean, one of the things that we are managing or trying to manage at the minute is we've got, you know, roughly 42,000 Ukrainian refugees fleeing war. So Ireland has opened, you know, warmly embraced the Ukrainians after the invasion. And I suppose really with our history, we obviously felt very strongly that we should do that. So it's really, I suppose, the plans that, you know, the best laid plans that we have, obviously they will need to be, you know, redone. And again, there's an opportunity there because we've got lots of Ukrainian kids now at our schools who are, you know, living with Irish families. And again, you know, I don't think it's possible in this very, you know, fast changing world to do any predictions at the minute, you know, and it's really, I suppose, to be open to that. And as I say, Ireland's a very young country. We're trying to help other people that are going through the ravages of war. We're well used to, you know, we're trying to get out of our sort of colonial shadow. And I suppose, as I say, it's just really to be brave and to be creative and to work in a participatory way. And I think that starts with young people and it starts with children. And that's really where my focus is, as I say, is trying to facilitate and empower that thinking in the Republic of Ireland with other people through, for example, the Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme.
Thanks, Sally. That's a really good point. One project I've been involved in has been over a couple of years with Young Scott, and it's been a group of young people who've worked with our organisation and worked on real life issues and provided solutions, and it's brilliant because they're the future users, but also it's that creativity that a number of our speakers have raised and sort of fresh thinking that you wouldn't get necessarily. Are there any other questions? Because I have been warned I must end the session on time, and I've actually got just to warn the fellow speakers, I want to come to all of you individually to talk about your one takeaway from the session and something you'll do differently. And I'll start to give you more time to think about, but just before we get on to that, are there any other questions any of our audience wish to raise, whether it's a question or just contributing your own experience? I'll give a couple of minutes for folk to put their hands up. Okay, so I will, as I said before, I'll go through my speakers in the order they spoke. So Sophia, Ali, Rob, and Marilyn, and it'd be great to hear your takeaway and what you're going to do differently. So for me, my takeaway is in and around the power of storytelling. I've been really, I think to make change to affect, change to influence, I think it's got to be how you tell your story, how you do it. And I think all of you had a really compelling story to tell. What I'm going to do differently, I mentioned on this call, I'm actually have the luck to be going to an event on Friday where we are looking at systems change in and about systemic racial inequality. So I'm very lucky I've got a chance to put this into practice, and there's a lot of notes I've taken down from here that I will contribute to that. So I will just come to you, Sophia, now, and we will unmute you. There you go. You should be unmuted now.
What's also really resonating with me is the focusing on what's strong as opposed to just what's wrong. Like we talk about analysis and assessment, community readiness, all that stuff, SWOT analysis, all that fun stuff, but actually putting it into practice. So again, practice versus theory. And really focusing and honing in on what we're working towards, I guess. I'm just really, I feel privileged and happy to have been a part of this. And I feel like I also learned a lot, and I'm really gonna take in and what everyone has said. And yeah, I just, again, like walking the talk, I guess. Of course, being early on in my planning, whatever, I don't want to say career, because like I know as as an Indigenous person, like we've been planning since time immemorial and since I was a child, the work that we conduct culturally and in our community, like planning the way it's been done for generations. But like this is like a whole new game for me. So yeah, I'm just a baby planner. Just yeah, walking the talk, I guess. So thank you for everybody's contributions and questions. I don't have much more to add.
No, thank you, and thanks for your contribution. We're not going to call you a baby planner. I think you've actually challenged quite a few of us in how we've thought. So thank you so much. So Ali, I'll move on to you now.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really enjoyed the discussion. I think there's a lot of, sort of common themes that are coming through from the group discussion. So I suppose really just for my own kind of thoughts moving forward would be that the OECD in Paris, talks about Ireland being a relationship-based society. And that one of the things that we need to do is to build networks, as a comparative advantage. So I think those networks can be national, international, and I think today's event has really, again, emboldened me. I love going to events like this because it just really gives me hope. But obviously, as I say, it's a sort of volatile world. And I think that those networks, it's really, the onus is on us to create those networks so that we can all work together for a better future.
Oh, that was me unmuted, not unmuting myself. So thank you. I think that's really, I agree with you, Ali. It's really, really positive to come here and to get these ideas and this injection. And also, it's really quite humbling to be in this group of feels like-minded people, and we're all quite dispersed as well. So Rob, I'll come to you now.
I'm not a baby planner. I'd like really I'd like to hear more from persons like Sophia in these kinds of sessions. With all honesty, I do less and less of this because it's just not for me. We need to move on and get others involved. I think the younger generation very much gets it. Quite frankly, they don't have many of the built-in perspectives where they're drawn to institutional solutions and things, quite frankly. They understand work in community for good and bad reasons, but it's the circumstance they're in. We tend to, and I've been using the word a couple times, when we're in institution, we try to appropriate and colonize community space, providing and under the guise of providing service. I think we need to be very, very careful with that. Community can solve itself on many, many levels. Sometimes they need support, and that's what we should be here for. So yeah, those are my final thoughts.
Thanks, Rob. I did cite the project. I was involved, the co-produced project with young people, and what struck me about the report we received was not only the passion, the energy, the enthusiasm, but it was in terms of a lot of the actions that were proposed. They weren't just in and around young people, they actually made good sense as well. It was very humbling, but I also I think it's balancing. I absolutely agree with that, but it's balancing with the point that some others have made about going to the same people and exhaustion. So it's how do we build the systems to enable that contribution? But Marilyn, I'll come to you now.
Yeah. Well, yes, to what Rob is saying, most certainly. And, diversity in the system, in the conversational systems that we're in, to me just feels so important. It hasn't been like that always, certainly at the municipal level, which is where we're focused at the moment. And I think that what the key takeaway for me, I'm going to be playing with this for a while, is what happens when I put Sophia's language about invented spaces rather than invited spaces together with Rob's language of catalytic rather than pilot projects. And there's something kind of magical in there when you change up the people in the room and invite them to think about what's catalytic as opposed to what's a pilot, right? A pilot's a one-directional thing. A catalytic is more of an explosion thing. Emergent, different kinds of outcomes. So just thank you very much to both of you for that language. So I'll be thinking about that. And I really want to appreciate too the chance to sort of try out in 5 minutes the stuff that we've been thinking about together for about 5 years. As I mentioned, we are putting together a toolkit, and it's our hope that municipalities will use this material in some way to help come January, February, to orient new councillors to the table, and that in this way we may be able to influence some more dynamic engagement with community, and at the same time more resources then going into council that, you know, result from different ways of thinking, particularly around the housing problem.
Thanks, Marilyn. Before I wrap up and thank everyone, I see Brandon Houston has just put a question in the chat, particularly for Rob. I'll just bring you off mute, Rob, for you to respond.
Oh, hey, I was just typing. Yeah, that's a bit more of a discussion because it really is. I mean, the simple answer is just a change of perspective, but there's more to it than that, right? It's some of the things we've talked about. I think elected officials, they have a particular role, expectations, and all that warrants kind of more of a conversation. So I'll offer to Brandon, being local and all, that maybe we can connect via telephone or some other way. I think we're connected on LinkedIn or something. So sorry, no quick solution on first step, because it kind of depends on the person too, right? It's where are you comfortable? My first step is different than your first step.
No, that's brilliant, and Brandon's looking forward to chatting to you. So all that remains for me to do is to thank our 4 speakers today. So Sophia, Ali, Rob, and Marilyn. I think that's been a really great, wide-ranging conversation. I think there's various cross-cultural lessons. What I've really enjoyed about this panel has been the combination of it's really connecting back to what Sophia said about the theory versus the practice, and everyone has got different lengths of time and experience, but there's still a real curiosity mindset and acknowledgement we haven't got it right, and what can we do? And I think there's been a lot of catchphrases, for want of a better word, whether it's catalytic projects or focus on what's strong and not wrong. But thanks very much, speakers. It's been a fantastic conversation, and thanks to all of you who have participated and asked questions. Thanks for putting up with our slightly clunky Zoom format, but isn't it brilliant that we can get together in this way? So hope you all have a great rest of day, depending on the time zone you're in. So thanks to everyone. Bye.